Lauren, thank you very much for taking a few minutes out of your busy time. I know you must be swamped with interviews and just talking about this wonderful Celtic City series, which episode 8 is coming out Monday night on HBO and then Max as well. And I have both and been watching, and it's been fun to watch. I guess from my perspective is I understand you went to a rivalry school of mine from the Big East days in UConn, which was my safety school. So
Oh,
I'm just kidding because the
quick
Celtics
dig.
UConn's dominating. So,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
tell us about that and then what it's been like for you, who have won Emmy awards and everything else for you, what you've done directing this whole thing. Because to me, it's just a beautiful history timeline of Boston, the Celtics, the country as you go along from episode to episode.
Yeah, thank you, Dan, and thank you for having me today. Yes, I went to UConn, and I am a proud New Englander. I have lived in Connecticut most of my life, and I'm still here. And the Celtics, what they mean to New England, obviously to Boston and the state of Massachusetts. Growing up as a UConn basketball fan, I was a huge fan of Ray Allen, and come full circle when 2007, 2008, that season, that dream season that Ray was a part of was just really cool as a Connecticut native to see come true. But yeah, I know how much the Celtics mean to New England and to Boston. And I think that was a big part of what we wanted to explore with this film. We certainly wanted to make it for those fans and for that audience, but we also the story of the Celtics really transcends, even basketball. It's a very human story, as you mentioned. There's a lot of rich history, American history and Boston history that was very important to us to incorporate. So yeah, it was just an honor to be able to tell the story.
And when you've tackled pretty much every aspect of it, what was it like to get everybody together? The interviews with Red Auerbach look like they're present day. I mean, it's beautifully shot and put together that way. But just the timeline and just hearing this and knowing growing up here the struggles of Bill Russell and some of the black players on the team or all of them, if you look back on it. What was it like to tackle that, and how did you get all these interviews together and then put them together and cut it down to what you have?
Yeah, it was a big challenge for all of us. I had an amazing team, amazing editors, our great showrunner Gabe Honig. We had a lot of material, obviously from 1950 when Red Auerbach takes a job is where we kind of start our story through watching this, the current team and their playoff run to a 18th championship, which was a lot to tackle. We were working on this story for almost 2 years as far as our production process, which isn't a ton of time for 9 hours of content. So we were moving very quickly, but we definitely wanted to make sure that we incorporated the history, that foundation of Red Auerbach, Bill Russell, Bob Cousy, like finding Satch Sanders and sitting down with him, drafted in 1960. We tried to pull as much from anyone who was left living. Bob Cousy was 94 years old when we went to Worcester to do that interview. Incredibly sharp, incredibly engaging. As you know, he's still very open to talking about these time periods, these the history, but also contextualizing it with how he sees things today, which was amazing and such an honor to be able to include. But we wanted to make sure that Red Auerbach and especially Bill Russell, as the founding fathers of this organization, that they had a voice. That through every episode, you were able to see Red Auerbach's ethos, his message, his values, the cigar, all of the iconic, moments, but also what he meant to people, what he meant to his players, what he meant to fans and to the city. So it was definitely a lot to try to digest. I think so much history. It was almost 70, almost 80 years of history we had to familiarize ourselves with. But I think to answer your question, just focusing on that foundation and building off of that, because I think even when you sit down with someone like Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum today, even Joe Mazzulla, when we did these interviews, they have such deep respect and a reverence for that history. Even Brad Stevens, like everything is built on that foundation. So it was very natural for us to continue to kind of weave that through from, beginning to end.
And up here for a lot of the younger fans, it's all the talk of Brady Belichick, right? And how that's unfolded. But if you
Yeah.
look at Russell and Auerbach in particular, they're both fascinating historical figures. And Red, like you said, all the way up through the weaving and the trading, Joe Barry Carroll for Parrish and McHale and pulling the eyes over another one and getting Bird and then Len Bias and the tragedy of that would have continued the legacy. But I look at Bill Russell, and even to this day, growing up here, like I said, I don't think he's appreciated for what he meant to the Celtics, but the city of Boston, and maybe more so the country, for what he did and how he handled himself and conducted himself in such was probably a difficult era for him to be around and grow up and be a star on that basketball team.
Yeah, and it was a huge, responsibility and challenge for us to try to. I wish that we had more time to, and we certainly could have done more. But I feel like what we were able to do and what we tried to do was, again, give Bill an authentic voice in this. And that meant our editors and our incredible team digging through the archives with everything that the Celtics and the NBA provided to us, that we were able to just sit and listen to these interviews and just try to find those moments. Even people have told us, like recently after watching the series, that they really connected with Bill Russell's laughter, like just the sound of his laugh, which most Celtics fans and people of that era were familiar with, but we're introducing that to a whole new audience that didn't know that, yes, he went through very challenging and turbulent times in the city, the things that were done to him, to his family, death threats, obviously his house being vandalized, stories that I think Celtics fans are familiar with and know. But I think we were also able to look at the joy and the sense of community that he felt, in Roxbury, and where he owned, Slade's Bar and Grill. And, we took Satch Sanders back to Slade's, and just being able to stand there with Satch, who's now 86 years old, and for him to remember those times of, a lot of these, players coming back and just having a sense of camaraderie and community in Boston, which I just think is often not covered enough with Russell's experience. I think there was a lot of joy. He meant a lot to so many people, and we were able to capture that, and obviously speak with Karen Russell, his daughter, who was incredible and so gracious with her time to just talk about those experiences from the perspective of the family.
Well, it's kind of fast forward a little bit to the Bird Parish McHale. I was fascinated with that stuff. I grew up in that time period. I was Donnie Wahlberg playing softball with my buddies, with everybody's trunk open, listening to Johnny Most call those games. How did you get Bird, McHale, Parish, all those players to come back and talk and talk openly about their relationships and about Bill Fitch and the backing of Bird and Fitch and everything else, and when he got fired and all? It was fascinating to watch it unwritten. And I thought Robert Parish was maybe the star of the that episode where he was basically wide open about his feelings. What was that like to get him to say all those things?
Yeah, so I'm going to give a lot of credit here to Jackie McMullen. She is, as you know, an institution, Boston Globe, everything,
Legend.
all legend. And yeah, she was a consulting producer with us on this film, on this documentary. And yeah, her relationships with Bird and with McHale and with Parrish were, I mean, paramount. Like, we would not have been able to sit down with Bird, I believe, if we had not had Jackie, have those conversations. She actually conducted that interview. He felt most comfortable speaking with Jackie. They had obviously written a book together and spent years of her career interviewing him. And he was so open that day. He was so, again, gracious with his time. I think what surprised me most about Bird, and I know you talked about Parrish, and I do want to touch on that because he was also very, very open in a way that most fans had not seen and heard from him before. But particularly with Larry, I think talking about, and you'll see it in episode 6, the end of his career and kind of what he endured physically, emotionally, the toll that it had taken, kind of reflections that he shared with us, even telling the story about being in traction and, needing to use the bathroom because, and he makes a joke and it's a funny moment, but it also is just a very vulnerable moment, I think, where you really start to realize the toll that it took on, for those, 12 seasons that these guys played alongside each other. It was, they gave everything, Kevin McHale just opening up about being in his car, sitting and realizing that, you know, he didn't know that he could do this anymore, and that there wasn't the same joy with it because of all that he had physically endured and because of seeing his teammates endure that as well. And again, Robert Parrish just completely open, just about why he was so guarded with the media, why he didn't let people in to see who he really was. And yeah, it was, yeah, they were both, all three just incredible to be able to hear them reflect in the way that they did all of these years later.
Yeah, I could talk forever about this, but I know we only have a few minutes here, Lauren. But the emotion of Max, what he did here and then gone, and then Bill Walton coming in with a totally different character. Taking these guys to the Grateful Dead, and Rick Carlisle talked about that during the NBA Finals down in Dallas. Just what that was like, that experience being around Walton. You forget the greatness of you show a lot of this too, which I like. I want to tell Celtics fans a lot of the on court action and
Yeah.
it's just how critical it is. And I go back to Jerry West and how angry he still seemed about losing to the Celtics all these years. So let's fast forward though, if we can, to episode 8. I remember everything about that season pretty much from start to finish. And the clip we're going to show is the dock and the duck boat parade, the pre and what that meant to that team. And I think maybe we all knew the story, but the emotion of listening to KG talk about it. Tell us a little bit about that, the emotion. I think that's the best part of this whole city, Celtic City, is the emotion that you get from all of these players.
Yeah, I mean, bringing up that moment with Kevin, with KG. I mean, I sitting in that interview chair, I did not expect the level of emotion that came out of him recounting that story. Obviously, well, not obviously, but we had done Doc's interview and Paul's interview months before. KG was actually our last interview of the series, so very late in the process. And I had heard that story, but I had never felt it. Like it was almost as though, I mean, you see it in the interview. He puts his head down. He's got his eyes closed. He, everyone in the room, we all had goosebumps. It was just him retelling that story of like how he was able to and how they all were able to see the vision of being in that moment and having that support. And that's what I love so much about that story too, Dan, was like the idea of the crowd. The sound, that's not wind, he says. That's the roar of the crowd. And like that to me is like that just embodies everything that Celtics City is, right? It's this relationship between this team, this city, and people. It's the connection between people, the connection that Kevin felt with the fans that he talked about, like being, in the arena and putting his hands on the walls to feel the rumble of the crowd and like how that juiced him up to be able to go out there and lay everything out for these fans and for the city. And that's just really special. I mean, I can say so much. We could talk for hours about just the Garnett interview,
Yeah.
just how amazing and fortunate we were to just have him in that moment. And he was he was enjoying it. He was even saying, he's like, I just love reliving this, and so yeah, it was very special and very special connection between the city
Yeah, I mean, I remember interviewing Paul Pierce after he got drafted, how happy he was. Then after he got stabbed, and how emotional that was. And you forget how young he was and just what he went through that whole ordeal. Let's wrap it up though with episode 8, episode 9. How do you wrap it up? Like, what's the is there an episode 10 coming if the Celtics make a run here for another title?
I wish I wouldn't be able to make that decision. But yeah, so we are going to wrap things up with episode 9 and Banner 18. And we also, it was very important to us. It was a story from beginning to end. And so just in the way that the founding fathers start this series, they're also going to be woven into how we wrap up this series in a very real way, not a way that we had to contrive, in a way that, as you see Jaylen Brown winning, the MVP award and talking so honestly and openly about, what it means to have that name, the Bill Russell MVP award, and just how that all comes full circle. So yes, episode 9 is unfortunately the end for us right now, but yeah, like I think it was really special that they were able to do it, in our production timeline, and we were there as the confetti rained down on our production team. It was really a storybook ending.
Well, that's awesome. It's a great series. Again, Celtics City, 9 episodes. Each one tells a great story. So it's an awful lot of fun. Lauren, thank you very much for taking a few minutes out. I know you're busy, so congrats on everything and continued success in your way too. And go UConn.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate it so much.